Hey, welcome to the Way of Valor. I am your host, Angie Taylor, and it is a pleasure to have your time today. Hey guys, today I am excited to share with you a little celebration for me personally, but also hopefully add a lot of value to you. We are going to talk about today the three key elements of raising up a culture-changing generation, but we're doing it out of the lens of my book, The Way of Valor. We're celebrating our 2-year anniversary since the book was published, and we've literally put thousands of books into the world. I know I have had the honor of talking through this with administrators and parents. This book, it was written very specifically with the parent in mind. So whether you're an educator or a non-educator, what I can tell you is there's value in it. I've had this conversation with school administrators that recognize, oh my goodness, we need to back up and do school differently if we're going to be successful in raising up this next generation. But I've also talked to parents who have received a lot of helpful hints on equipping and training their kids. So we're going to do a 2-part series, A and B, on this book, just kind of unpacking for you a little of the key level 30,000 foot points out of the book. I would recommend the book is available on Amazon. I will link it in the show notes for you as well. So if you have not read it, or you can also get an Amazon copy of, or an Audible copy of it. So it's available in both. You can get it on Amazon. I recommend it. It's an easy read. We tried to do it in a storytelling format that makes it interesting for you to stay engaged with the book with poignant points that will hopefully help you. It's also the story and the unfolding of valor. It's a little bit of a mesh, but I'm told by people who have read it and used it that they've found it to be incredibly helpful, including having a parent let me know it was literally one of the top 3 books that they've ever read on parenting, which I will take it. So with that said, I wanted to talk today very specifically about the first 3 critical pieces for us as educators as well as parents if we are going to help raise up successful adults who are producing and adding value into the world. You know, on a side note, my husband and I just personally passed this milestone in the last week. Our youngest daughter turned 18. We have 3 adult children now. And what I can tell you is I had a moment of pause with my husband that said, I feel like we really need to go celebrate one another. Like we literally made it through with 3 kids being produced into the world that we are actually incredibly proud of and have close relationships with all 3 of our kids. They all have a close relationship with Jesus. Of course, they're not perfect. Of course, they have their own things going on and their own battles. But the reality is at the end of the day, for my husband and I, we had 2 really key goals for our kids in parenting our kids. And that was, we want them to love Jesus with their whole heart because we believe he has the best plan for their life. And if they stay close to him, they will be okay. The second thing is we wanted to have a relationship with our kids that into adulthood, they wanted to be close with us into an adulthood. They sought our input and advice into their world, and they became friends as well as our kids. And I can happily tell you today that has happened for us. And it's been not because we've been perfect parents. It's very much been this journey of just leaning into Jesus and then being really honest about the results. As an educator, I can tell you I've been in education for 30 years. I have watched parents do this really well, and I've watched parents do it really badly. I've gotten to see kids from K through 12th grade. Most of the schools that I have run in the course of my education have been kindergarten through 12th grade years. So I've often gotten to experience watching a kid from kindergarten all the way to 12th grade and watching and seeing what they do into adulthood. So it's been just this blast, but it's also been a little bit of an experimental journey where I've taken notes and done research the whole way going, well, that was successful. That doesn't work. And making notes. And so what the Way of Valor is I've really tried to unpack in this book for you just as succinctly as I could and as easily as I possibly could, some key elements that if man, as a parent, you will lean into these things, you're going to be okay. You don't have to get it all perfect. You are human. You come to the table like the rest of us, flawed and with errors, but there are some key elements that when you step into those things, man, we see some powerful transformation in the lives of kids. And so that's what I've shared with you in that book. And I want to make sure that if you have not had a chance to get a copy of this, that you get it. Again, head on over to Amazon. I will put the link in the notes as well for you. But let's start. All right. Today I'm just going to unpack three points for you. The book is not a long book. I think it's like 190 pages somewhere right in there. But I'm going to start with 3 main points, and then next week I will finish up with the rest of it. But the first thing is I started asking the question, having been in education, what I started seeing as I stepped back was, man, there are a lot of parents that are spending a lot of money to put their kids in private school. There are parents that are going to church. There are parents trying to raise their families, and yet their kids are still jumping off the edge and going down this wild, crazy path when they graduate from high school. Is there a way? I kept asking the Lord, is there a way, God, for us to create a structure and system for these kids that doesn't have to be the story, that doesn't have to be the narrative by which they live by? And of course, because we love Jesus, we believe he has a good plan and purpose for our life. Of course, he can redeem our kids when they've made bad choices or when they've gone down a wrong path, but do they have to? Like, is there a way for us to raise our kids in such a way that they stay close to Jesus, that they stay connected with their families in a powerful way? And I believe the answer to that is yes. I absolutely believe the answer to that is yes. So the first thing I started asking myself is the question of, how do kids actually win? Like, what is required for kids to actually win in life? And when I say win, I know sometimes if you're really competitive or you're really Americanized in your thinking, as I am often, that you might interpret that, how do they win, as somebody's winning, somebody's losing. That is not. I actually believe we all get to win, right? I don't believe somebody has to be a loser in context of, by the way, I'm super competitive, which is a sidebar. So when you are playing a sport or a game, there needs to be a winner. However, at life, we all get to win. So that was really the question that I started with, is how do kids actually win? What does that look like? And interestingly enough, there was a landmark study done by researchers. And what they did was they took fifth graders, and they had fifth graders of different abilities. They had some with lower IQs, lower abilities, and then they had some with higher abilities, very academic, high IQs. And they took them and they placed them in this study, giving them multiple tasks to complete. The key element of this was there were tasks in the study that were actually not able to be completed. They were fake tasks. They weren't able to be completed. And the reality is what they did was they put this study together in such a way that they weren't actually measuring kids' abilities. They were measuring their attitudes. And here's what they discovered is the kids who took effort very seriously, meaning if I try hard, if I put my focus and energy in this, despite what their abilities were, they discovered that those kids were far more successful at completing the tasks and engaging in tasks that were even unable to be completed. So what that means is when our kids take personal responsibility, how do kids actually win in life is taking personal responsibility, recognizing your ability isn't fixed. Too often we hear people saying, I'm not good at that. I'm not good at that. So I'm not even going to try. And when the reality is both your IQ as well as your capabilities are not a fixed point in time. They have the capacity to grow if you put effort and energy into them. So the reality is kids who take personal responsibility actually are more successful in life when they understand, anything's possible for me, I am just going to put the effort in. I think of this very much in light of starting a school, starting Valor. The truth is I'm not the smartest bulb in the bunch, right? I know so many people that are so much more academic, smarter than me on so many levels. But the reality is Valor has been successful in large part, one, because of God, but also because I knew if this depended on just simply pure work ethic, well, listen, nobody's going to outwork me at the table. I will stay up all freaking night to get something done. And the reality is if we can instill that into our kids, they will be largely more successful in life than somebody that came to the table with high IQ. But we live in a society today that if our kids don't like it, if it's hard, if it's this, we bail out. And too often, frankly, as parents, we're the same way, right? The amount of kids I talk to that, they're sure they have ADHD or ADD, and the parents are too, it's like, what have you done to help them in their focus? Because learning to focus is like a muscle that has to be developed, and you got to take personal responsibility. You got to put some goals in place and go, man, as long as this depends on me. And that's not to say there's not ADHD, but I am telling you, we have way overdiagnosed it, way over medicated it in this country. So the number one thing your child needs for success, and this is whether your child has learning, they call them learning disabilities. I like the word learning differences. The reality is a child that has dyslexic is not broken. They learn differently. And that is an important thing for us to help shift the narrative, because in the same way that I just said, if you take personal responsibility to learn, a dyslexic actually can learn to read. They may have to work harder at the process, and they may have to learn to do it in a different way. But it is possible for them to grow that muscle. And so it's really important that we understand as parents, the number one thing that we should be coaching and training into our kids is personal responsibility. Your effort matters far, far, far more than your actual abilities. Because at some point, people with natural God-given abilities, if they're not matching their effort with those abilities, and you see this all the time, you guys, you see A+ students in school, when they get into college, they start petering out and they fail out very quickly often, because what happens is because school was easy for them and they got A's, they interpreted their abilities as being the most important thing. But when they got to college and now they were swimming at a faster, higher lane that was harder for them, they recognized that they didn't have the effort and the intention, and they felt like, I'm just not smart enough to do this. I'm going to quit. And they throw their hands up and quit. The study actually defines that as learned helplessness. It's learned helplessness. And we see this all over. I see it in adults all the time, as well as I see it in kids, with people that are just embracing, if my abilities aren't there, or if it's a hard, it's just I can't do it. I'm not going to do that, versus my effort matters. I'm going to do the hard. I'm going to invest, and I'm going to take the personal responsibility to be successful. Number 2, begin with eternity in mind. So often when we parent our kids, we are parenting them from the perspective of this circumstance, this time right now. How am I feeling about it? How am I going to fix this problem for today? And we don't ask the question, what does my child need in this moment to grow closer to Jesus? What does my child need in this moment to fulfill the God-given divine destiny in their life? Because I'm telling you, that answer is often really, really different, right? Just to break it down in a very easy nutshell, the truth is if your kid's having a problem with a friend, it is really, really often at that point just to go, kick the friend to the curb, block them, don't have anything to do with it. We're not going to hang out with that friend. Rather than asking the question of, if eternity's in mind, what is the right answer? Well, the truth is your child is going to need to learn to deal with difficult people. Jesus was the epitome of going to the lost, going to the brokenhearted, going to the difficult, working with people that nobody else wanted to. Jesus was consistently reaching in and building relationship with those people. And so if we're going to help our child be Christ-like, if we are going to help our child be successful in life, we're actually going to help them learn to have critical conversations, tough conversations, conversations that help bring mending in that moment. Because if we're looking at it from the end in mind, we parent really differently versus that person hurt my kid's feelings, we're out. That is essential. I think it's really important right now to point out to you as well that traditional school model is very much set with a stuff content in. If you're in 7th grade, you get this content. It doesn't actually matter what your learning styles are. It doesn't matter how you're gifted. It doesn't matter what you're curious about. None of that actually matters. You're 7th grade, all 7th grade kids matter, and it all goes like this. And the truth is that is about stuffing content in to someone versus recognizing someone with divine destiny, plan, and purpose and drawing out of them who God has made them to be. That's a very different mindset. One is I'm just stuffing information into you. Right? That's the education system as we know it. When we started Valor, we asked the question of what does transformative education look like? And transformative education starts with the individual who has a divine destiny, who is marked by God, has a call on their life by God, has gifts and abilities by God. How do we draw that out of that person? And yes, we still do math. We still do science. We still do all the things. In fact, we have one of the best accreditations as a school that you can possibly have while we go through the journey of transformative education. And how do we draw out individual giftedness? How do we call to that divine destiny in each one of our kids? But it all starts, whether you are an educator or you're a parent, it all starts with the question of it beginning with eternity in mind. God has plan and purpose for my kid. And in this moment, in this circumstance, that may be really difficult, may be really frustrating, there actually is a way for me to parent that is going to help my child draw closer to Jesus. There is a way for me to parent that is going to help my child grow closer and build up their potential, right? But too often we are so in the moment that we just try to fix the circumstance. And in reality, when we do that, we continually have to fix the same thing over and over again. And our kid never learns the skills that they need to learn. So that's the second thing. The third thing is raise up creators. Raise up creators. This world is longing for creators, not simply consumers. You guys see it in your social media feeds, in your phones. You know, I am not against phones and social media actually at all. I think we have the most powerful tool. I built an entire school system marketing, a lot of free marketing through social media. And so what I can tell you is it can be a force for good. We also know the danger, it's a force for darkness and evil, but it really boils down to how, as a family, are we practicing and using social media, right? How, as a family, so is your child learning that social media is a powerful instrument to add voice and light into the world? Or are they learning social media is something I scroll mindlessly every night, I don't ever create, and I just consume what everybody else is putting out there? And then, yes, there is a lot of darkness. There's a great story of two men that are standing alongside of a river. And as they're standing in the river, all of a sudden they see a child floating down the river, and the child is drowning. So one of the men jumps in to save the child, but pretty soon there's another child in the river. And so the other man jumps in, and pretty soon the children are coming down one by one in this river, and they're consistently drowning, and they're frantically pulling them out, putting them on the riverbank, when all of a sudden one of the men jumps out of the river and starts trucking down the riverbank. The one in the river frantically trying to save the kids is like, where are you going? Why are you leaving me here? And the reality is the one running down the river was the one that was going to solve the problem and create this actual solution. So they went down the river to figure out, how are these kids getting dumped in the river to begin with? You see, a creator thinks really, really differently. They think with solutions. They think with, I'm not just in this moment. They're thinking, how do I add value to the world? And they think really differently. Culture is created downstream, you guys. And so often our kids are just capturing, right? Like the man in the river capturing the kids. Our kids are just capturing all of the entertainment that's coming at them, all of the education that's being stuffed into them. They're just capturing it. And really, when we started Valor, it was, we're running down river, or we're running up river to create the solution. So we're not simply just sending kids into a drowning way where they're just capturing the world, but we're positioning kids to be the solutionaries of the world. And as a parent in a home, you also should be positioning your kids to be the light, to be the solution, rather than, I hear so many parents that are so afraid of what is going on in this world. But here's the reality. Who they are surrounded with matters vastly. It matters big time. Are they surrounded with people that are also just consuming the garbage that the world is stuffing into them? Are you as parents just consuming the garbage that the world's putting into them? Or are you guys running downstream going, how do we be the creators? How do we be the solutionaries? Because the reality, as people of God, we have complete access to the throne room of God, the font of all wisdom. In fact, James tells us, when you lack wisdom, ask for it, and I'm going to give it to liberally. In fact, if you ask without doubting, you will be successful. And so it's just really important for us that we understand and we position our kids as, man, we actually have the solutions for the world. Yes, the world is dark. Yes, it can be scary, but when we run upstream and we look at our kids as the creators for those solutions, then we need to surround them differently. We put them in places where they learn to think in creative ways, in ways that are solution creating, rather than, man, am I just in a system? Am I another cog in a school education wheel? Because if that's the way they see it, it's just stuffing it in, throwing them along on the assembly line. You're not special. You're not unique. In fact, we're going to communicate to you that you are destroying the world. Here's the reality is our kids are the highest form of creation. We are the highest, as human beings, we are the highest form of creation. God put us on this earth as co-creators with Him. And I can tell you this messaging that we are sending our kids, that we're overpopulated, we're destroying the planet, we're going to take it all down. And that is not to say we should not be good stewards of the planet. Please hear me. I believe firmly in being good stewards, but we are destroying our kids with this message of, you're the problem, your birth, we're overpopulated, which, by the way, also, do the science, go deeper on this topic. Stop just taking what's getting stuffed into you from all the mainstream places and start asking better questions. And that is really essential for us. If everybody is saying something and you're seeing it coming from all the mainstream media, you should probably be asking them to step back and just ask questions. Ask questions. Do a little more research. What are different thoughts? What are different ideas? Is there a way that you can be a part of the solution here, rather than feeling like, oh my gosh, my world is just being destroyed and we are all the problem with the planet? The fact is again, I go back to point number 2 of begin with eternity in mind. The Bible says that God has a good plan and purpose for our lives, right? His plan is to prosper you, not to harm you. If we will take God at his word and help our kids learn that we can trust that. So we don't need to fear our future. We don't need to fear that we're the problem. We actually can lean into the font of all wisdom and recognize that we are not the problem. We are the solution, in partnership with God. That's the way we want to train our kids. And I'm going to loop this back around then to the very first thing I said. We need to ask the question of how do our kids win, and taking personal responsibility is literally essential. So when we are looking at the problems of this world and what is being thrown at us, we get this tremendous opportunities to ask, are we going to be a part of the problem and just suck in what's being thrown at us? Or are we going to run upstream and create solutions to the world? And no, you're not going to be able to solve every problem because we are the body of Christ. Each one of us has a piece of the puzzle. And how are we preparing our kids to understand their role and responsibility as a part of the body of Christ? And the way we do that is helping them take personal responsibility for gifts and abilities, but recognizing their effort actually far, far outweighs those abilities, because abilities can shift and improve and grow over time. So that's our first part. I'm going to continue next week with the second part of this conversation. But hey, if you enjoyed this, I didn't even touch the iceberg on what you can find in my book, The Way of Valor. You can go over to Amazon, find it in Audible. As well as I've interviewed a lot of guests over time on The Way of Valor. You can check back in our feed and find a lot of help and support as a parent for raising your kid, or if you're an educator, for how you are educating. I'm actually really excited. We're currently in the process of designing The Way of Valor Part 2, very, very specifically for educators, to unpack in very specific terms how it is we do education. How are we different? Because this message needs to be shared. We actually, you guys, when you look at it, we can transform our nation through education. Our nation was shifted and changed through education. We actually can use that same vehicle. It's actually a beautiful vehicle if we see ourselves as part of the solution. So anyway, I hope this was valuable for you today. If you liked it, please, please, please go on and do a review. Your comments matter. We read your comments, your feedback. I read all of that. It's actually so helpful for us in making sure we're getting you good content that supports you well. This journey of parenting and raising up this next generation is not for the faint of heart, but together we can be powerful. So blessings on your day. Thanks for listening.